Welcome to Berry Yarny Adventures, episode 4. My name is Tanya, and I'm coming to you from southeast Minnesota, where my family and I run Firefly Berries, which is a fruit farm, and I dye yarn naturally with plants that we grow on our farm. So hello, welcome. It is a beautiful day in Rochester right now. It's about 78 degrees. There's a nice breeze, and I'm not too hot wearing a shawl. So I hope you are all well. It's been a while since I have come to you to share a little bit about what's going on with my Yarny adventures. I think about 3 weeks perhaps. I have done a lot of knitting. When I went to go gather up my items though, I sort of felt like maybe it wasn't as much as I thought it was, but I think it's because I have actually finished three items since I came to you last. So let's get right into it and let me share what I have finished. So first off, I finished this shawl that I am wearing. This is the Grocery Girl shawl by Hohi Locatelli, and I'll take it off so you can see it better. It is knit in Berry Fun yarns. It's very long. It's a very, very long, I guess you'd call it asymmetrical. The dark color is Dusty Rose, and that is in a new base that I'm trying out. It's a yak, I believe it's like 70% merino, 20% yak, 10% nylon. So that's what the darker one is. And then the lighter one is called Raspberry Apricot. And I love this lighter one because it sort of has these just little pops. It's a very peachy color, but it has little pops of pink in there. You can kind of see it up close. Anyway, it's super soft because I used the yak base, and then the other base is the jewel base that I carry, which is 80% merino, 10% nylon, 10% cashmere. So it's very soft. Yeah, I think it's about it, but it was a nice finish. It blocked out really well, and I really like it. It's a little bit warm to keep it on today, but I think I will get a lot of use out of it come fall because it is a very nice kind of neutral palette that will go well with a lot of the things that I wear. And then, one of the things I have finished, I actually don't have with me. I finished the Georgia socks by Tracy Miller. I'll put a picture in right now. These socks I made for my 8-year-old son Lincoln, who, if you have watched me before, will remember he asked for air-conditioned socks, meaning socks that had a little hole in them or eyelets in them. This one has a really neat pattern down the side of the foot that allows for eyelets. It's super simple, and I loved the pattern. It was only, I want to say it was like 11 stitches on each round that you had to do something, but it was only 1 out of 4 rounds that you actually had to do a pattern. Otherwise it was knit or purl. So it was really a fun pattern. It kind of gave a little bit of interest, but not too much that the sock took forever. So I actually think I will do that pattern again on a full-length sock because Lincoln's and the pattern are shorty socks. But I think I might try it on a full-length sock and just do vanilla everywhere else except for that little bit of patterning on the side. So that was the second finish. And then the third finish that I had is actually a very large finish, and I know you won't be able to see the whole thing on the camera here, but I finished a blanket. This is the Habitation Throw by Helen Stewart of Curious Handmade. I can talk today. And it was so fun. I think I mentioned this on the last episode I did, but strawberry season really knocked the wind out of me. I was just really burnt out from anything having to do with being outside or the farm. So I have been knitting a lot. And this one was, once I kind of got towards, you can see the end in these really huge projects, and then you're like, oh, I can't stop knitting. So then I just kept knitting. This is actually a Christmas gift, but I'll kind of show you the half. This is one side, and then the colors on the other side. I guess they're the same because I'm showing you the whatever. My brain isn't working today, but I love it. It turned out quite large. I think that it will be a decent size lap blanket, enough to keep you cozy. The pattern does call for you to use fingering weight yarn. I actually wanted it to be a little squishier and to go faster because I am a kind of a loose knitter. I tend to have to go up 2 needle sizes for most patterns to get the gauge. So I held 2 skeins or 2 strands of fingering weight, 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon together. And I used mini skeins for the color. And then I also held Berry Fun Yarns barley colorway with it through the whole thing. Now I will say I got to the end. Now it's supposed to be a perfect square, and it did block out pretty much like a perfect square, but I think that I must have forgotten some decreases. So how the pattern works is you increase until you get, I think it's 40% or 45% of your yarn used, and then you decrease. Well, I think what I must have done on some of the rounds is I forgot to do some of the decreases, so my decrease didn't go as quickly as my increase went. So my square wasn't really a square. It was sort of like had a wonky side to it. Here's the end. I did a different finishing on the end because I did not do the I-cord as you go edging. I just did this, I think I knit 3 and then I did a yarn over just because that was easier for me. But it did block out in the end and it was okay, and I think my recipient will still love it, but I was sort of like, what happened? But yeah, so the habitation throw is all finished and ready to be given as a gift for Christmas. So that was my 3 finished objects. And then works in progress. I have cast on a fair number of things. Last time I was talking about some ideas I had of things I was going to cast on, and I still want to cast on all those things, but I was also feeling kind of lazy. I know that many of you understand what I'm going to say here right now, in that I didn't want to have to wind yarn, so I cast on and I worked on things that were either already in balls or cakes or were just easy to pick up because I didn't want to have to take out my why can't I think of it? My ball winder and Swift, that's the word. I didn't want to have to take those out. So it's not a big deal, but it's just one more step when you just want to sit down and knit and you don't want to think of anything else. So what I ended up doing is I was working on my granny square blanket. So I think I talked about this a while ago, and it's basically, I use fingering weight yarn, and it's just these little tiny granny squares. I do it where there's holes on the end, but not in the middle like a typical granny square. So I did this many, which is actually quite a few. I think it's about 30. You might remember last episode I talked about my purchases of the Un Besito snack packs. And I had these sitting on my dresser. I got 3 of them, and each pack comes with 12 10-gram minis. And last episode I was talking about how I had all these arbitrary knitting rules, these things I needed to finish before I could work on something else. And I just decided, heck with those dumb rules. I'm the boss of my knitting. I'm going to knit what I want to knit. Well, in this case, I'm actually crocheting. But I was like, that's stupid. Why do I create these dumb rules so that I can feel guilty if I cast on something that I want to cast on when I have something else? It's ridiculous, is all I have to say. So I told myself to forget it. I told those rules to bugger off, and I just picked up what I wanted to pick up. So I actually completed squares for all of the colors of these in 2 of the 3 packs I bought. So I did the Rainbow Sprinkles pack, and then I did the, I think it was called the Light Side. I love them all. This is the Rainbow Sprinkles. These are so fun because they're kind of, I don't know, they look like rainbow sprinkles. This one is one of my favorite colors. It's like a purpley magenta color. I'm not going to show you them all, but They're really super fun. This one's fun too. I'm really into the bright colors lately. That one's really blowing out. It's like an orange. I don't know, there's just something, I think because, whoa, that one's really bright. There's something about, the world is kind of a mess right now, and everything seems kind of dark and gloomy some days that I'm really gravitating towards the bright colors. And you will find that when I tell you about another project that I decided to frog. And then this is the light side kit. These were let me show you a few of these. These are really pretty too. But these are they're more like a pastel, pretty coral color. This one is my favorite here. So that's beautiful. Look at that. It's kind of blowing out, but just the really subtle color change. So I did 24 of those from the Un Besito snack packs, and then I just did a couple other random ones that I had. This one's a Very Fun Yarns one. I think this is Summer Lovin'. It's like a blue background with a little bit of purple. Yeah, so that was super fun. These only take me about 10 minutes to crochet. So I try to do a couple like when I wake up in the morning or when I have a break. Oh, I have a cat that's going to decide to come visit me. I have 3 cats, and I typically don't podcast in the same room as them, but today they all wanted to be in here. This is Soleil. They're all black. Anyway, I'm going to shoo her away in hopes that she doesn't get too noisy. She likes to meow. But this is not a cat podcast. This is a knitting podcast. So that was, those squares were some more of my finished objects. So I had the 3 full ones and then the squares, which I'm still working on. And I think that I need, I think I need about 80 to 100 to make another big section of my blanket. And then I will have about half of it done. So that one is going to be for my son who will be a senior in high school this year. I wanted to make a blanket for each of them to take with them when they go to college. And so that one I believe is going to be for him. I did also work, for talking whips now, I'm moving into whips. I did work on my granny stripe blanket, but I didn't get very far, so I'm not going to show you that one for a while. That one's just kind of plugging along. I love those scrap projects. They're just a great, palette cleanser when you're in the middle of some big project. So I have been working also on my unicorn tail socks, and this is a colorway from Very Fun Yarns. So it is dyed with cochineal, which is a bug, not a plant. However, it is a natural dye. It comes from nature. It's not created in a laboratory, so I call it a natural dye, but it is a bug. And then the blue is indigo, and then the overlapping is where the indigo and the cochineal was overdyed with the indigo. So I've gotten through my heel. I put in a contrasting heel, just one that I had gotten from a friend up in Canada, and I don't remember who the dyer is. And now I'm on the foot. I think I have maybe to decrease just a couple more rounds for the gusset decrease, but then I'll be to the end. So that'll be my first one. This is where I left off last time. So that's how far I went on there. I've been using that. I homeschool my kids, and my youngest, who's 8, we do like reading every day where he reads out loud to me and I read a couple pages, he reads a couple pages, other stuff like that. So socks or really simple knitting, I tend to actually do while I'm teaching them because I don't have to think about it, or when I'm listening to piano lessons or things like that, because I can just knit and I don't really have to pay attention to what I'm knitting, but I keep my fingers busy while I'm helping them work on a subject of some sort. So I'm sure my knitting time will get cut a little bit here in the next couple weeks as I start to plan curriculum for the next year, but if I'm sitting, I'm usually knitting something. So that's the unicorn tail socks. This is a fun bag I actually made. I bought a pattern online. If I can find the name of the pattern designer, I will put it below. But it's just a really simple drawstring bag, and I just followed the directions and it works perfect. I am not a sewist by any sense of the words. My mom is. She had in the past has made wedding dresses and all that kind of stuff, but I just dabble in the things that do not require to fit well. So, you know, things like bags and stuff like that. Okay, the other thing, I'll start with this. So this is a shawl that I'm going to frog. This is the Arya shawl by Amba O'Brien. Oh, the lighting is kind of weird there. There it is. So it's I love it. It's a beautiful shawl, and I love the pattern, and I probably will still knit this with something. But after I finished the habitation throw and the shawl and the socks, I was like, I am casting on something. I don't care what it is. But I had this realization as I was getting a few things in the mail that I have a lot of yarn, and I don't have a huge stash, but I have plenty of yarn, and I was feeling a little overwhelmed by it. So I was trying to pair together some things that were in my stash, and so I pulled out this. The blue is an indigo dyed. Oops, that's backwards. Indigo dyed DK. So the shawl is DK weight, and the indigo. It is a new base that I'm trying out. It is. It's merino, silk, and yak. I do not remember the exact percentage of each, but I like it, and I do think that I am going to switch to this base eventually and not carry the 100% superwash merino that I have right now, unless I have a special request for it. I love the 100% superwash merino, but this, if you could feel it, if we had feel-o-vision here, it's so soft and drapey, and I really do love the feel of it, which is why I wanted to knit it and why I pulled it out. And then this is DK tweed that I had left over from my Soldotna crap. So I started off, and it has this really pretty, can you see that? It's a really beautiful like slip stitch section every so many. Well, I didn't have enough to only do it in blue because I think it called for, let me see, I think it called for like, I want to say it was like 600 yards. Yes, it needed 2 skeins, and each of the skeins were supposed to have 250 yards. My skeins, these DK ones with the silk and yak, they only have 231 yards. So I knew I would have to fudge a little. So I wanted to use up the green. Well, the green I didn't have even a full skein of, so I knew I didn't have enough of that. But I thought, oh, I can fudge it. I can figure it out. It'll be just fine. I'll just kind of make it work as it goes. Yeah, it didn't work so well. So I cast on, and then I got to like right here, and I realized I was increasing incorrectly. I was increasing every round instead of every other round. So the shape was a little off, but I was like, oh, it'll work. I'll just make it work. And I kept going, but then I got up to here, and I was like, oh, I know. When I was doing this large section, I was like, I am almost out of this green yarn, and I haven't even gotten to the decrease part. Although the colors are beautiful and I do like them, the combination of the two was just not making my heart sing. And I think it goes back to what I was saying before about those little squares that I was crocheting. They're just kind of dark. They're not, I'm really needing more pop in what I'm working with to help me feel inspired, to, I don't know, just give me a little pizzazz in my life. So the colors not jiving with me, coupled with the fact that I thought I was going to really have to, what I was most concerned about is that the shape was going to be really wonky. This is a beautiful shape, but if you screw up the knitting, it's not going to be that beautiful shape. So I decided to throw in the towel, even though, I'm going to drop that there, even though I have knit quite a bit on this shawl. So I'm going to rip this out, and then I will reskein the yarn, and I'm sure I will find another project to use them for, because I love the yarns and I love the pattern. just not together. So instead, I cast down something very bright. I went into my, keeping with the theme of not wanting to wind yarn, I went into my scraps, or my bin that was like partial skeins of fingering, and I found these 3 things. So one of them I've actually already used up, but this one is Doubleberry Milkshake, which it's kind of it's a more muted Doubleberry Milkshake. It's a Berry Fun Yarns color. This is on 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. But I love this color, and I've learned not to make myself socks with a white base, because as much as I try to remember to wear slippers when I'm wearing them, I don't. So I walk around the house and they just get worn and they don't look as nice. So I try to stick to darker colors for socks. So I hadn't used this. I think I made a pair of mittens for myself where I held this double with, or triple even, with some other colors. So I like this one. I've been holding this one. I think I had like 60 grams of this. And then I had this one, which it's kind of hard to see, but it's, you know, there I can see better. This is Dream in Color Smushy with pink base and some purple pops. So I had these, and then, wait for it, Shazam! This one's really dark and bright. This is, I think it's called Lavish DK or Sport, and it's by One Twisted Tree. The colorway is a girl's night out. Unfortunately, Danny is not dyeing yarn anymore, but knowing that, I have been holding this in my special area, right? I didn't want to waste any of it. I had made, I think I only had about 40 grams of this left. I made one of my favorite winter hats. The Hermione's Everyday Hat is out of this. So I thought, oh, I can make something together. And I had the Free Your Fade pattern by Andrea Maury. I'll put a picture. I didn't print it out because it's quite a simple pattern, but I'll put a picture in so you can just see what the finished one looks like if you're not remembering. It's one of those that came out when she was first starting her, I think it was after the Find Your Fade. Yeah. Anyway, my fade is not going to be very subtle. It's very pow, but hello. I love it. So I started with the Girls' Night Out because that was the smallest amount that I had on the skein with only 38 grams. And I figured, well, in the beginning, I can get more length for farther when the rows are shorter, so I can get more bang for my buck with that color. And then I'm doing the pink, and then I'm going to end with the purple. So it is not going to be a subtle Free Your Fade. It's not going to fade. It's going to be more stripy in those sections, but I think I'm going to love it. And around my neck with my purple hat, it's going to be super squishy and fun. And both of these yarns, like this one is listed as a sport weight, and this one is kind of a heavy fingering. This one is 400 yards, 200 grams, so it's probably the thinnest of them, but these two are kind of squishy, so they just feel super nice. And I am knitting it on a size 3 circular Licky or Luca needle, which I love. I got these for a Christmas present from my parents one year. Anyway, so this is my happy bright color project, which I love. So worked on those. Let's see, what else can I tell you about? Oh, I did pull out my hexagon blanket. So I finished one blanket, but I think I still have 4 more blankets on the needles. I have the Granny Stripe blanket and the Granny Square blanket, which I've told you about before. Then I have a Northeasterly blanket that's just barely been started. That is thicker weight. It's like heavy DK worsted weight. And then I have this blanket. This is a hexagon blanket that I started a long time ago, but I kind of got burnt out on it because it's kind of putsy. It's little tiny hexagons, and you knit them on double pointed needles. And I'm not having it really good. It's called the Barrel Blanket. And I don't see who the author is on here, but I will link it below. But it is really cool. I'll show you. So it's little hexagons, but it takes a long time to do them. And I was pretty kittywampus in how I blocked part of it, so you can see the part that was blocked. It is a knit as you go, like attach as you go. So you don't have to, you have to weave in a few ends after each one, but you don't have to sew them all together at the end, which I do love compared to the granny square blanket that I'm making. So anyway, I have quite a bit done, but it's not in a very square way. I thought about frogging this project at one time, but I already put so much work into it that what I decided I was going to do is I'm just going to like set it aside, and when I feel like it every once in a while, I'll pick it up and I'll do a hexagon. But if I don't want to, who cares? I can put the mini skeins or the scraps into one of my other blankets. There will always be more yarn. So before I had been setting aside, you know, like I'd do a crochet square and then I'd put the yarn in my fun bag I got from my friend Debbie. And I would put it in here, and then I'd make one of these hexagon squares, and then it would go into like a granny stripe blanket where I could just use the rest. Well, now I'm just sort of, if I want to keep it in there for here, like I don't really want to put it in the other ones, I put it in there. But if I really want to put it in the other ones, who cares? There's going to be more yarn. I don't know what this thing is that we think sometimes that yarn will no longer be available when we need it, but it's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, the point and the reason why I'm showing you this is that after I finished making the little granny squares with these Un Besito snack pack colors, I was like, oh, those would be really pretty in the barrel blanket. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm in no rush, but I think I'm going to knit one of the hexagons, and then when I'm done with that, then I'm going to put the rest into my granny stripe or, my granny stripe blanket. So anyway, that is a fun blanket, the barrel blanket. I think, let me check, I wrote some notes down. Let me see if yep, that's all my whips. Wanted to say just two other things that I'm working on. I am planning on casting on a swatch for my Novelli sweater. I talked about that quite a while ago, but I have been apprehensive to start it because I thought I had to swatch for it. But then I realized that I just made a sweater in that same weight of yarn. I can just measure my gauge off of that. I can use that as a gauge swatch. So there's a tip for you. If you use similar or exact same bases of yarn, just make sure you keep a project page where you know what size needle you used and the yarn, and you can just use your sweaters or your shawls or whatever as your starting point for your gauge. Now, of course, if you made it a long time ago, it might not be as accurate because our gauge can change over time. But if you've made it recently, why make yourself do the work? So I'm going to cast that on soon. I'm excited. I really want another sweater is the deal. It's not really starting to get cold, but it's starting to get closer to fall where I want to wear these things. So yeah. And then the other thing, I'm kind of multi-craftual, is that I really wanted to cross stitch again. I used to do it when I was younger, but I would buy these huge projects and then they'd take forever and I would kind of lose steam and not finish them. So I wanted to make something, oops, I'm making noise here. Sorry about that. I have one grandma still alive. She has just turned 90 this year and she still lives in her own home around the block from my parents who take care of her. And what do you buy a 90-year-old woman who has everything? She doesn't need more knickknacks. Sometimes we give her, like jam or jelly or things that we make like that, homemade things, which she likes. But I was like, well, I have to make her something. She's always hot, so I can't really I made her slippers last year. But so this year I was like, well, I'm going to make her something. So I found this neat cross stitch. And when I was a little girl, that grandma and my grandpa used to take me. I lived in Wisconsin, and we would go to Shawls. If any of you are from Green Bay area, you might know where that is. We used to stay at a cabin, sometimes for a week, and we would go fishing with my grandpa, and we'd play cards, and we'd have hot cocoa. Sometimes we'd go later in the season or earlier in the season when it was still really cold out. So we'd be like a cold fall weekend and we'd have hot cocoa and all that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of really fond memories of going to a cabin with my grandparents when I was a kid. So I thought, well, this is perfect because it has the little cabin, and they really did look a lot like that where we stayed. And there's the little dock where we'd go out. And it wasn't until I was older that they had it was a paddle boat. It wasn't a speedboat like this with a motorized boat. But usually we just fished from the edge of the dock. So I'm excited to start this. I think it will be fun and something different when I need a little break from knitting. And this is only 7 inches by 5 inches. So it is, and it has some half cross stitches in it. So I don't think it will take me. I think it's manageable for me to get done before Christmas. So that's that. And the only other thing I wanted to just share with you would be a little bit, I'd like to share stuff about natural dyeing. And I have not really been dyeing much. Right after I posted the last episode, I did do an indigo vat. But other than that, I haven't really been. Business has been pretty slow because I am not setting up at our local farmers market this year because of COVID and the difficulty of selling yarn when you can't touch it. And and a lot of events are canceled. So it's fine, it's not a big deal, but I'm just sort of taking a break. And if the spirit moves me, I will dye yarn. But if it doesn't, it's okay, I have a good stock right now. But anyway, so it got me thinking, I would like to share some things about indigo dyes. While I was dyeing, I realized that I don't really have anything on my website, and I don't really have anywhere online the uniqueness about indigo dyes. So what I'm trying to say here is, I'm not doing very well, is that indigo dyes are very unique. I do not use this is the only dye that I use that is not 100% natural. I use pre-reduced indigo crystals. And what that means is a synthetic version of indigo that is chemically exactly the same, but it's been pre-reduced or kind of dried down so that the process of making the vat is way faster. You also do not need to use you don't need to use, I want to say I can't remember, but it's not lye. I don't know why I'm thinking it's lye. Anyway, there's disposing of what you need to get the vat right when you use 100% indigo leaves or powder is, I think, a lot worse for the environment to dispose of that toxic substance than it is for the way I do it. So I get it pre-reduced because of that. It's easier for me to use, and it's easier for me to dispose of without having to worry about harming, the wildlife or the plants around. So anyway, when you dye with indigo, whether you use a pre-reduced crystal like I do, or you use the plant material, it creates a physical bond. So when you do other things like the acid dyes, those, and even most of the natural dyes, they create a chemical bond, which means that when the dye adheres to the yarn, it chemically is now combined. It binds together. Whereas in indigo, it's a physical connection. And the reason that is important, this maybe is getting too sciencey, I'll try to make it simple. The reason that is important is that when you go to knit or to crochet or to work with indigo dyed yarn, some of your color, the blue color, will come off on your fingers. There is a term for it, and it is slipping my mind at the moment, but I will probably put it on the screen right now. Anyway, so when you're knitting or crocheting, for me, I was sort of knitting. You can't really see it. Nope, you can't see it. I will get a little blue kind of, ring around my finger because of how I'm holding the tension on my left hand while I knit with my right hand. or sometimes you might get it on your fingertips. So you'll get this rubbing off of it, and a lot of knitters get really nervous when they see that, especially if they've never knit or made anything with indigo dyed yarn, and that is because the physical movement of the yarn through your fingers is completing the process of how the indigo adheres to the yarn. It's very normal. It does not mean that the yarn has been dyed incorrectly. It doesn't mean that there's tons of excess indigo on it. It's simply a part of the process. So when I dye indigo, I take, after I've done the skeins and they've dried, I wash them all afterwards to make sure if there is any excess dye in it, I get as much of it out as possible. The excess, of course, will be greater if I'm making a really richly saturated color, or if it's some of the first skeins that I've dipped into the vat. So this shawl that I was doing, I did get a fair bit of, because this is a pretty dark blue, it's pretty denim blue, I did get a fair bit of dye that came off on my hands. But if I go to wash this right now, I'm going to get hardly anything out in the water. So all this to say is that if you do knit or crochet with indigo dyed yarn, do not be frightened if the color comes off on your hands. The only suggestion I would make is that if you are doing color work, especially if you're doing a really dark blue with, say, a white or really light color right next to each other, it's always smart when you first wet block or wash your finished garment to wash it in cool water and to stand by it and keep an eye on it. Don't put it in warm water and walk away for 20 minutes, because just the mere fact of it sitting in there for that long may cause it to leach out and to move to the other color. So if you hang nearby and you watch it and you notice that you're getting some dye out, you can quick scoop it up and rinse it, and there'll be no harm done. But I have been dyeing indigo for, I remember, 3 years, 2 or 3 years, and I have knit with many different skeins of it, and never, no matter how dark the color comes off on my hands while I'm making, have I had a problem with it bleeding when I wash it, or bleeding. I've done color work with it. I've never had a problem. That's my own personal experience with my indigo dyed yarn. But it's something to know, because it happens sometimes, right? You get a skein of yarn from an indie dyer. For a while they were giving indie dyers a bad rap, saying that, they don't know how to set yarn correctly, and they don't know how to, and it was kind of off-putting, and people, at least I know I felt a little apprehensive to purchase those really richly saturated colors. But it's just a part of how it works, right? Any acid dyer will tell you the exact same thing. You need a lot of color to get a deep red. You need a lot of color to get a deep purple. Heck, if you're a cake decorator, you need a lot of color to get black. You need a lot of color to get red. It's the same exact thing. So just be a smart maker when you're washing your items, and make sure you stay nearby, you use cool water, you use your common sense. But when it comes to indigo, do not worry. If you purchase indigo dyed yarn from me, that is a totally normal part of the process. If you have any more questions about that, please feel free to leave them below, or to message me. I'd be happy to chat or to send you more information about that whole indigo process. So I think that's it for works in progress, finished objects, and a little bit of dyeing. The only other thing I wanted to just be sure to tell you before I end here is that I am starting a newsletter for anybody who's interested in receiving updates about Berry Fun Yarns. I do have, my store is quite full right now online, and I will link that store below, and you're welcome to purchase. I am shipping out pretty much whenever I get orders, because I can ship right from home and have the postal carrier pick that up. So feel free to check that out. If you're interested in being on my newsletter, I hope to send out updates every month, every other month, every 6 weeks. I haven't quite decided whenever there's something new and interesting that I need to tell you about, when there's a sale or a coupon code I want to share with you. I do not plan on inundating your inbox with weekly emails or anything of the sort, so they will not be super frequent. But if you're interested in being a part of that, if you can just personal message me, say, hey, I want to be added to the newsletter list, and give me your email and your first name, and I will do that. But otherwise, thanks so much for joining and for listening and checking out all that I'm making, and for your interest in Very Fun Yarns and our farm. If you like this video, be sure to click the like button below or to subscribe to the channel so that you can receive updates whenever I post new videos. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you are all doing well, and have a happy knitting, happy crocheting, happy whatever it is you're doing to enjoy the last bit of summer here, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.